Yeah, so let me introduce Kyle. Kyle Cleveland, and you met his partner last night, is a former Homeland Security analyst. He's been involved in the issue of caring for his wife Laura, who spoke last night, on raising children when she was going through treatment, and she was diagnosed when she was pregnant. So, Kyle really had to jump in there. He also, this is interesting, I'd love to hear about this, owns a music recording, a sound refinery, and a specialty music recording company. So let's welcome Kyle Cleveland to talk about the role of the caregiver.
Move the mic away a little bit. Feedback is still on. Okay, a little bit about myself. I'm Kyle Cleveland. I'm married to Laura Cleveland. Want to let you know that I worked my way through school as a male supermodel. And you might have seen me in the 1983 swimsuit edition of the Husbandry Quarterly. Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Well, probably find it on microfiche somewhere. In 1990, I hung up my Speedo, and I became Laura Cleveland's trophy husband and boy. I want to talk to a specific group of folks this morning, of the caregivers. How many caregivers do we have? Cool. Great. You're my audience. I don't have slides with me, unfortunately. I did have some macaroni art storyboards, but they didn't survive the flight, so we're going to have to do this without artwork. I hope you can bear with me. Before I talk about caregiving, I'd like to kind of flesh out our story, my story, Laura's story, our family story, and give you an idea of where we're coming from and what we've been through. And I'm sure a lot of this is going to mirror your own experiences. I've been a caregiver over the past 18 years. Going all the way back to the fall of 1997, things were going great for us. Things were really going well. Laura was a teacher. She was progressing in her career. She had about 10 years under her belt. And I had been offered a job with the government that effectively doubled my salary in 1 month. We've been blessed with a beautiful 4-year-old daughter, Anna, who, by the way, is getting married in May. And we suspected at that point that we might have another one on the way, which we did. Laura went to her OBGYN to verify what the first response test had demonstrated, that she was pregnant. And as she went into the examination room, a lot of times the physician will put the chart, or the nurse will put the chart in the door. And Laura, being the snoop that she always was, looked at that chart and looked at her lab work, and there was a post-it note with nothing other than lymphoma 70%, reactive to pregnancy 30%. Doctor comes in. Laura's got the folder in hand. What the hell? What is this? Well, I was going to say something to you, but we wanted to have some more tests. We saw something funny in your blood work. It's probably nothing. We'll just go from there. Long story short, her final diagnosis was CLL. I'd never heard of that, or never heard of that. Started looking on the internet and found out that it was generally a disease of men, median age 70. Here's a 36-year-old pregnant woman with a disease of old men. It didn't make sense. So great. Pregnancy and cancer together. What to do? Well, we were advised as you've heard before, time and time again, watch and wait. That's a rough phrase. That's a rough thing to do, wait. Especially if you're like Laura and I, you're kind of both, in some ways, type A people. Like, we want to get this done. We want to get it over with. And that wasn't happening. April 13th, 1998, though, our son Alex was born, who's in excellent health and just celebrated his 17th birthday last week. And we're just so glad that he's here and that all of our children are healthy. In the meantime, Laura's white counts continue to grow. She began to show visible signs of the disease, splenic enlargement, nodes. She had to have a node excised. So things were starting to change. And this was 1999, early 2000. So this is when we started searching in earnest for effective treatment. Now, this has been talked about at least a dozen times in the last day that I've heard about community oncologists, your community doctor. We didn't have a very good experience with our community doctors. We went to 5 hematological oncologists in the Columbus area. And the opinions ranged from, you got 20 years before you have to worry about anything, to the more prevalent, you'd be lucky if you make 5 years out of this. And as a matter of fact, the last guy that we talked to in Columbus, I won't mention his name, but he was a brother of a good friend of ours. I told him, all Laura wants to do is to see her kids grow up, at least get through high school. And he looked at me square in the eye and he said, that's not going to happen. That will not happen. You need to be preparing yourself now for her death. What a shock. Here I am, a young guy myself, 2 little kids. We started making preparations. We had a place in the country. We moved to town. We bought a condo. I was thinking, well, I can't do yard work and take care of a baby, so if I move into this condo, at least that will be taken care of. And that was my line of thought at the time. At this point, Laura and the internet became intertwined. Thank God for Al Gore. So Laura had been, at that point in time, data was limitless, and she was burning up all of her time learning all she could about this disease, and she came across Dr. Michael Keating from MD Anderson, and he was running this phase 2 clinical trial for CLL with RFC, and I know it as Rituxan, fludarabine, and Cytoxan. I think that each one of those has a little longer chemical name to it, but I can't pronounce it. So we organized a trip. We thought Laura might be a perfect candidate. We traveled to Houston the week of Christmas 2000. And as Laura said last night, we got down there expecting an explanation of the treatment. And the next day, she was in the clinic being infused with Rituxan the very next day. That was the worst thing I had ever seen in my life. I had no preparation for this other than Dr. Keating saying to us, patients sometimes die with this because of the cytokine storm. Really? Yeah. Oh, well, that's interesting. So I watched helpless as my wife is lying there with incredible rigors, literally almost flipping off the table. And Dr. Keating was telling me that they would throttle the Rituxan, that they would infuse more until her body just about could not take it, until she was just about ready to shock out. And they throttled back. The next week, they put together the whole cocktail of RFC, and she really had no more symptoms after that. At the end of the week, Dr. Keating came in and talked to us, and he said, 3 months you're going to be in complete remission. He was right. Pretty amazing. 2001, she's in complete remission. 3 months out, she's in complete remission. 5 years total, 5 years out, she's in total remission. 14 years plus, total remission. Oh, the shoe drops. The treatment that brought total remission also blew out her immune system. So she began to get serious infections. Every winter, she was hospitalized with pneumonia. Sometimes, I was on my knees praying that she wasn't going to go because it was that close. So she now is tethered monthly to IVIG infusions, which are kind of rough. How many of you have experienced the IVIG infusions? How many of you get sick afterwards or just feel like crap? You guys are lucky. It's a rough road to hoe, at least from an observer's point of view, from a caregiver's point of view. So, in my viewpoint, RFC cures CLL, but IVIG saves her life every month. She gets no infections to speak of. She's relatively healthy. We're good to go. Now, I've been Laura's primary caregiver for 18 years. We spend a lot of time weeping and laughing and arguing and praying over this whole leukemia business. And the things that I have learned as a caregiver, in no particular order, is that you need to be a good listener. Talk therapy is good. Encourage your patient. I refer to who we give care to as our patients. Encourage them to open up completely and pay attention. You pay attention to every word that they say. Learn the art of active listening. It's not important for you to talk. It's important for them to talk. They've got a lot of stuff on their mind. Depending on their personality, they may not want to show it, share it. You've got to draw it out. You have to be that active listener. Conversely, you need to be a good talker. You need to encourage discussion of anything and everything that's not related to CLL. Talk about your kids. Talk about sports. Whatever trips their trigger. You need to help your patient not to have that spiral down into the dumps. Laura and I call it the pit of depressive thoughts and the whole fatalistic, this sword is hanging over my head. God knows they think about these things on their own enough. So as much as you can, bring a little levity into the situation. Bring a little levity into their lives. Be an encourager. Laura told me the other day, she told me how important it was to her when I simply say, it's going to be okay. Hell, I don't know if it's going to be okay, but I'm going to tell her it's going to be okay. And she hangs on that. Your patient is just as frightened as you are. And what are we the most afraid of? The unknown. We don't know. So we can go one of two ways. We can tell and think and feel in our hearts that things are going to go to hell in a handbasket, or we can tell ourselves and our spouse or our patient, it's going to be okay. And that makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in the recovery. Number 5, have a backup plan as a caregiver. I'm going to tell you a little story. As part of my problem, my memory's gone. Who was speaking just before me? Brian. I thought it was Brian, but I want to make sure it's Brian. said, I'm a former Homeland Security analyst. I had quite an interesting job. And I've done that for 15 years, and also I served 10 years as a National Guard instructor. So the idea of a backup plan for caregiving is an integral part of how I do my own problem solving. In battle, plans are usually the things that collapse shortly after that first bullet's fired. But planning wins those battles. Well, how does this relate to caregiving? Well, September 21st, 2011, 11:22 a.m., I sustained a fairly severe traumatic brain injury and an incomplete spinal cord injury. I won't go into the myriad of issues that caused, but suffice to say that there's a lot of physical, cognitive, and emotional things that happened, continue to happen. And so I was, for all intents and purposes, out of the game. Within a year, I went from this coveted GS11 manager slot with the government to unlocking user IDs and passwords at their data center's help desk. That's all I could do, and I couldn't do that. My agency worked with me for about a year out of respect and concern for Laura's situation and my situation, but they finally asked me to take disability retirement at the end of that year, and I'm still a young man, relatively. So the instant of my injury, the caregiver became the care receiver. But unfortunately, Laura didn't magically stop being the patient in that same instant. Our plan B was to accept the help of a very close cohort of family and friends who were willing to stand in the breach for Laura and me. And they've been doing so consistently, day in, day out, for the past 3.5 years. The point being this: you and your patient need to have a plan in place if you're suddenly unable to take care of it. You know, there's no guarantee that we're all going to stay healthy to be able to take care of our patient, our loved one. The same thing that happened to them may happen to us. We may be out of the picture. So avail yourself of community resources. Look to folks in your church or synagogue. Enlist your family members, and do all of this before you need that help. And finally, gotta find my finally here. Remember, when all this was going down, and I was freaking out, and as I said, had a baby, an infant, a preschooler, very demanding job, moving in the process. I was talking to my dad about how my life was torn up, and I didn't know how I was going to go on. And he looked me square in the eye and he says, "It's not about you. This isn't about you. No matter how frustrated you might be over how this has upset the plans for your life, it's upset your patient's life too. Plus they have the added bonus of having cancer. So try to keep that in mind as you go through your caregiving life, is that your patient is going through the same emotions you are, and more." Thank you.